The last thing that I want to do is Nancy Pelosi's take on running centrists as the way to win and the best path forward. Oh, Nancy. So here's a piece in Truthout, and it's titled, Nancy Pelosi's Winning Strategy is to Appease Centrists. This is by Karen Garcia and Sardanicki. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tells the New York Times that the way to beat Trump is not through impeachment or championing progressive causes. To win, Democrats have to be more friendly to centrists, which is neoliberal speak for the donor and corporate class which owns her organization. If you cower, they, the mythical center of the electorate, will come. Remember how well that smarmy strategy worked out when Neville Chamberlain tried to appease Hitler by granting him permission to invade neighboring countries in the belief that the rest of Europe and capitalist interests would be spared? Even more recently, remember how well that worked out when Pelosi's party thought it would be a great idea to run Hillary Clinton in 2016 and destroy Bernie Sanders at the same time? The polls and the pundits certainly thought she'd be a shoo-in to beat Trump. So let's double down on that winning strategy. If that doesn't work out, it will be all the fault of the deplorables again. If it doesn't work out, Nancy Pelosi personally will never have to suffer, nor will the Democratic donor class, who are flusher with cash than ever, thanks to Trump's tax cuts and their investments in his military machine and prison industrial complex. It's a toss-up as to whether Pelosi's main problem is corruption or senility, or a combination of the two, when she posits that only a boring centrist can win in 2020. This boring individual will win by such a stupendous margin that Trump will never be able to challenge the results. On the other hand, the results of a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren victory could not possibly be stupendous enough to physically scare Trump out of the White House. Only a Biden or Buttigieg or maybe a Harris would triumph in a landslide, which would bury Trump forever and ever. Glenn Thresh reports, sitting in her office with its panoramic view of the National Mall, Ms. Pelosi, the de facto head of the Democratic Party until a presidential nominee is selected in 2020, offered Democrats her cold-blooded plan for decisively ridding themselves of Mr. Trump. Do not get dragged into a protracted impeachment bid that will ultimately get crushed in the Republican-controlled Senate, and do not risk alienating the moderate voters who flocked to the party in 2018 by drifting too far to the left. Own the center-left, own the mainstream, Ms. Pelosi, 79, said. Of course, Pelosi's version of center-left actually skews more towards right of center. She neglects to mention that the moderates who did win their midterm races were heavily bankrolled by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which refused financial aid to what she dismisses as the exuberances, including the victorious Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She also neglects to mention that such right-wing Democratic senators such as Claire McCaskill and Heidi Heitkamp lost badly in their own bids for re-election, despite their soulless, valiant efforts to appeal to the mythical center. The tacit message of the Times article is that if Sanders or Warren win, Trump will not go quietly, but he will magically go quietly if Biden wins. So, just to make it clear, what Nancy Pelosi is scared of is that Trump will refuse, if he loses the presidency in 2020, that he'll refuse to leave the White House. The guy's not a king, he'll have to leave the White House if he loses. He might challenge the results, and in fact that's likely if it's close, but he's still not a king. He's not going to just get to stay there. And that's what she's saying. We should vote for centrists so that King Trump can't refuse to leave. It's a very ridiculous argument. If you really want to dig right down to the center of the centrist id, Pelosi doesn't even want a Democrat in the White House. She'd rather dance the triangulation tango with Trump for 4 more years. Pelosi is trying to gaslight the electorate at the same time she dog whistles her reassurances to nervous Democratic Party donors, who have made no secret of the fact that they dread Sanders or Warren in the White House, because both these candidates threaten to unconscionably use their power to serve people who don't have as much money as the big donors and the corporate lobbyists do. She claims that if Democrats would just cringe pragmatically and appease Trump now, he will be less nasty and dangerous, less likely to irrevocably poison the minds of the malleable against the Democrats during primaries and the general election. She bizarrely calls this her cold-blooded plan for victory. I'll grant her the cold-blooded part, and I'll even compliment her for having one hell of an overdeveloped lizard brain to go along with all that ice in her veins. Her strategy amounts to pretending to be scared and disgusted by the Trump administration in public, but being complicit with and accommodating to the Trump administration in private. Pelosi seems confident that the actual public is not reading about this cynical strategy in the Times, mostly because they probably can't afford the subscription, despite working several jobs. And if the bottom 80% or so of the reading public are perusing the Times, maybe Pelosi can instill the requisite doubt and fear into their psyches. I doubt that she cares about anybody but her donors. The underlying message to her real constituents is that she's got their backs. She's cold-bloodedly pushing the scales, hers and theirs. One thing to keep in mind about many Times articles and op-eds is that they are essentially telegraph messages from the rich to the rich. But in a show of egalitarianism, they are happy to offer the lesser people a tiny box with which to share their expertise, 1,500 characters or less, with their peers. If you are very lucky, your comment will be accepted by some mystery algorithm and make it into print, blanked out for a second. If you write from a centrist, pragmatic point of view, a human moderator is very likely to award you a coveted golden Times pick icon. This digital badge of honor is the equivalent of a jolt of dopamine and will encourage you to write more centrist and influential comments in the future. So I think you get the point here. The point is that Nancy Pelosi apparently doesn't know anything about politics at all. She apparently doesn't know anything about America at all. She apparently doesn't know a thing about American citizens. She doesn't know what people need and want and are voting on. For someone who's been in politics for so long, she knows nothing about politics.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.